This is the corded Makita track saw. I've owned this for 2 years. It's mine. This is the 36 volt, 2 18 volt battery version of it that's popular for the past few years. It's not mine. I'm borrowing this from a friend. And can you hear? There's something wrong with it. Can you hear it? It's shaking in its boots because there's a new kid on the block. This is the brand new 40 volt, 1 battery Makita track saw. And in this video, I'm gonna tell you all the differences between these three and give you some much needed information if you're making a buy decision. And at the end, I'll tell you whether I'm going to upgrade from my corded saw to the 40 volt, 1 battery. Oh my. Those are heavy. And the answer may surprise you because it certainly surprised me. I'm recording this video in January of 2021, and if you've been trying to get your hands on one of these, you know how hard they are to find in the United States. I believe they were released last fall around the world in other parts, like in Australia. They seem to be common there, but in the US, it's hard to find them. They're not on Amazon right now. They're not at Home Depot. There's basically 1 or 2 places online, Tool Nut and Tool Barn, where you can get them. But even then, they're often out of stock and there's a lot of lead time. This one came from eBay. It's not mine. And a stranger who I've never met contacted me and asked if they could send this to me to let me borrow it so that I could make one of these dust caps for them. They're familiar with my YouTube channel and they said I could have it for 2 weeks, do a video on it, and I gotta ship it back. So that is mind-blowing crazy that a stranger would send this saw to me to review. So thank you, William, for doing that. This corded track saw is mine. I paid my money for it. This 36 volt I'm borrowing from a friend and he needs it back tomorrow to do his work. And this one, as I said, was sent to me from a stranger and I need to mail it back this week. So because of that, and because of prices of lumber, and because I don't have any major projects I'm working on right now, I can't really run all of these two through the paces to get a really good feel for them. But what I have done is I'm familiar with my saw, and so I'm comparing these two saws against what I know and how I'm familiar with this one. So this isn't gonna be like a several month review where I've used these every day. I'm sure there'll be people who are able to do that. I'm not able to do that because these saws aren't mine. I don't wanna beat them up, and I have a short amount of time to borrow them for these purposes. So if you're coming from the corded version, we're gonna be in the same headspace, but I hope that even if you don't own these saws, or maybe you own the 36 volt, you'll be able to get a good feel for this guy. It's pretty cool. So instead of a deep, in-depth review, this is more of a first impressions of these based on my experience with the corded saw. Now through this cost comparison, I'm just gonna do tool only, which is gonna be different because these tools wouldn't come with batteries, where this one doesn't need a battery. I know you can occasionally buy kits that have deals. I bought mine in a kit with a guide rail, but as of today, if you were to buy these tool only, I'm gonna give you that pricing baseline. The SP6000J, also known as the corded version, goes for $379 right now on Amazon. Now these prices change all the time. I bought mine for way less than that 2 years ago, but right now if you wanna buy the corded version, you're gonna shell out $380 just for the saw. If you want a guide rail, a Makita guide rail, just one 55-inch, costs about $85 right now. You can go cheap and get a PowerTech, and you can get 2 PowerTech 55 inches for about a little over $100. This 36 volt version, known as the XPS02ZW, goes for $367 right now, tool only, without batteries. If you want the battery kit, you're gonna spend $499. So that's kind of good to know. Corded, $379. If you wanna be able to use the 36 volt and you don't have tools that already have the 18 volt batteries, you're gonna spend $500. If you want the 40 volt right now, tool only, $429. If you want it with one 4-hour amp battery, $599. A $100 difference between the 36 volt and the 40 volt with a battery. If you want a guide rail with these, a corded with a guide rail, $464. A 36 volt with a guide rail, $585. A 40 volt with a guide rail, $685, assuming you can get it. This 40 volt battery is a 4 amp hour, $199. If you want a 5 amp hour, $250. If you want a 2.5 amp hour, 149. These are expensive. Well, there's a lot that is just the same no matter which power source you choose. First, they all use a 165 millimeter blade. They have a 20 millimeter arbor. They all have the same cutting depth. They have the same bevel range. They all have the scoring pass function where you click this button and you go down just 2 or 3 millimeters to do a scoring pass, and you remove that button and you can do a full plunge. They all have a 1.5 inch diameter dust port. They all have what Makita calls electronic speed control, which keeps these things working at the same speed. They all have soft start, but they don't all have the brake. And most importantly, they all use the same Makita guide rail, which is the same as the Festool guide rail and the same as the PowerTech guide rail. Now, what are the differences? And there are some. The first one that I noticed is the RPM range, which is kind of weird. I don't understand it, and I'm curious if you understand the importance of RPMs and how these might change because of the power source. Let me know in the comments. I'd love to learn about that. The corded saw has an RPM range of 2,000 to 5,200 RPM, and the adjustable dial on the back goes from 1 to 6. The other two only go to 5. The 36 volt goes from 2,500 to 6,300 RPM, and the 40 volt goes from 2,500 to 4,900 RPM. So the surprising thing to me, and I don't know that it matters, is that the 40 volt Trek saw has less RPM on the high end than the 36 volt. Does that matter? The corded weighs 9.7 pounds, the 36 volt weighs 11.2 pounds, and the 40 volt weighs 11 pounds with the battery. Another difference is the corded version uses carbon brushes that might need to be changed depending on use, but the 36 volt and the 40 volt are brushless. That's a big difference. A big surprise to me is the blades that these come with. They're actually really good. Often if you buy a tool, like I bought my table saw and it came with a piece of blade, didn't even use it, and sometimes tools come with that. But with these, they're actually really good. This is the blade that I've had for 2 years, and it's a 48 tooth carbide. It's not quite a full kerf, but it's thick. It's not thin kerf, and it's a great cross-cutting blade. I've had no issues with this, no reason to change it out. I'm not sure exactly what blade comes with the 36 volt because my friend has a DeWalt blade in it. The 40 volt comes with a 45 tooth thin kerf blade, and it is awesome. I'm a big fan of these CMT track saw blades, and I found that this was really, really close to this quality. And I love these, but if I got this saw, I would not change the blade out with this until after this blade started to fail. It's a really good blade, and I'm really surprised Makita sends a high quality blade with their saws. The corded version, I don't think has an electric brake. Nowhere in the marketing material in the manual can I find it talking about an electric brake, and I've never noticed the blade stopping quickly when I used it. But on these cordless versions, they do have an electric brake. As soon as you pull your hand off the trigger, it stops, which is a nice feature that I didn't know that I would like because I don't have it on my corded version. Here's the 40 volt. One change in these two models that's different from the corded is the hex location of like the hex key. In the corded, it's stored in the handle, which is kind of cool and kind of cute. On the 36 and 40 volt, they moved them to the rear. Doesn't really matter, but there they are. Now let's move these two guys out of the way for a second, and let's focus in on the star of the show, the 40 volt. I love the color, by the way. It's really cool. And if you're comparing these two, this one is certainly heavier because of the two batteries. This one is way bulkier, and this one is thinner. Definitely ergonomics-wise, obviously you're using one battery in the way that the battery goes in. This is a lot better than the 36 volt. Did you know there's actually 4 different Makita track saws? I have 3 here, and I didn't know until researching for this video that there's a 4th one. They make an alternate for this 36 volt that has Bluetooth in it, the AWS system. This one does not have AWS Bluetooth in it, but this one does. And honestly, what had me really interested about this saw was the 1 battery option and the Bluetooth. I have a Festool CT MIDI back here, and dust extraction is really important. If you have one of these, they plug right in. But when you don't have a cord running here, it's how do you turn on the vac? Well, the cheap way is if you have a Festool and you have Bluetooth on it, you can buy one of these 40-volt remotes and you can turn it on this way. But part of the fun of using these things is having it automated, which I love with my corded saw. So for this one, I was beyond the one battery. I was really excited about the Bluetooth until I got it. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm gonna try to make it through this part of the video without swearing because I'm really, really angry. First of all, it's Bluetooth capable. You have to buy this little Bluetooth chip to put in here to make it work. And guess how much these suckers are? $75 for this. On the count of three, let's all say it. 1, 2, 3, boo. Okay, Makita. Clearly I'm Team Teal. I've got all my Makita stuff here. And I've got 3 Makita track saws and I'm spending my time doing a Makita video. I'm clearly Team Teal and part-time Team Green. But really, $70? $75? Why can't this be included? Or if it's not included, this should be $20 at the most, but it's $75. So not only are you spending $600 with a battery to use this, if you want it to be Bluetooth, you got to spend another $75. So my friend who sent me this bought one and sent this to me. And I was super delighted to plug it in because my CT MIDI is Bluetooth. But guess where this is going? Take a wild guess. If this Makita Bluetooth pairs with this Festool Bluetooth, just take a guess. You're right, it doesn't. Now, I don't know if that's because Festool has locked down their communication, or I don't know if it's because the guys at Makita have locked down their Bluetooth communication. But for whatever reason, these don't talk to each other. On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, boo! Makita, Festool, you gotta do better than this. If we're spending $600 on a saw, if we're spending $640 on a vacuum, don't make us spend $75 and more to get these two things to talk. And I get that the brands, you want to keep them separate and you want to make your money. But here's the deal. I've got an Apple iPhone. Apple makes a wireless speaker, but I can connect this to my Bose wireless speaker. I can connect this to any wireless speaker. The Bluetooth is agnostic. Why are these not agnostic in their Bluetooth technology? This is my biggest complaint with the saw. Can you tell that I'm angry? I haven't cussed yet, so that's good. So as I did a little digging, I found out that some of Makita's dust extractor, in fact, the dust extractor they market right now doesn't have AWS on it. They sell a smaller one that does, and guess how much that one is? $579 to get a small dust extractor that will talk to this. On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, boo! Come on, Makita, what are you doing? Then I stumbled upon this guy. It is WUT, which must stand for what are you thinking? WUT2U. And it is a universal Bluetooth receiver. Plug this into the power outlet on your auto vac. For those of you wondering, and I did wonder, it needs a chip. And do you think Makita includes one of these $75 chips in this? Actually, they do. I was kind of setting you up there. They surprisingly do. It's not very clear, but they do have one in here. They better for the price, because you want to know how much this sucker is? Take a guess. How much does this universal Bluetooth adapter work for a vacuum? Take a guess. $181 for this. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Boo. So let's be clear. If you have any dust extractor in the world other than the one that Makita currently makes for $579, and you want your Bluetooth brand new saw to work with this, whether it's Festool or whether it's a Fine or Bosch or DeWalt or some shop vac you have set up, you're going to need this, and it's going to cost you $181. 1, 2, 3. Boo. Not good. This really is a deal breaker for me. I think This should either be built in with the saw or it should be included. And if it's not included, it should be $20. This should be no more than $40 or $50. Now, does it work? Sometimes. I hooked this up to the Festool CT MIDI and I paired these guys and they work. It does what it's supposed to do, with one exception, as long as you don't remove the battery. If your battery dies and you need to go charge it or you swap it out, guess what you have to do? You have to repair these. I changed my blade to do a test. I pulled the battery because that's the responsible thing to do. I didn't want to cut off my finger. I changed the blade. I put this back in. I wasn't thinking, because when you spend $181 and $75 and $640 to have auto start Bluetooth, you're paying that money to not think about it. I wasn't thinking about it. I made my cut, sawdust got everywhere, and I thought, why didn't this work? And I figured out, because I had pulled the battery off to change the blade, I put this back in, and I didn't even think that I would have to repair them, because like when I turn my computer off, or when I turn my mouse off, or when I turn my keyboard off, and those are Bluetooth, I don't have to repair the keyboard and the mouse every time I change the batteries. They just work. So here's the overall cost. If you want to get a 40-volt track saw with a battery, with the Bluetooth adapter, and 2 guide rails, and a Makita dust extractor that works with this, you're going to spend a whopping $1,624 just to be able to break down some plywood or do some stuff wirelessly, and it all work. Am I going to switch from my trusty corded saw that I paid $330 with a guide rail for this? No. I'm not going to spend the money. Here's the deal. I'm usually working in my shop and I always have power. I really like this XGT line. And I think it's great if you're on job sites where you don't have power. But the thing is for track saws, usually it's like finish work or fine work. And I can't imagine too many situations where you're doing that type of work and you don't have power. And even if you do have power and you want to use this for convenience, that's great. But the cost just seems way too high, especially when the thing you would want is to be able to turn on your dust extractor isn't included, and you've got to shell out a lot of money. In fact, the money you'd have to shell out for the Bluetooth chip and this, you get really close to being able to buy one of these. If I didn't own any 18-volt Makita tools and I was going to jump onto the Team Till bandwagon, would I go this direction? Probably. I like the idea of these 40-volt batteries, and they seem to be the future. But if you have lots of 18-volt and you're on the 18-volt system already, and you already have lots of these batteries lying around, I don't know, unless you're just made of money and you like to splurge, I'm not sure very many people, I wouldn't, jump to a new battery system and replace all of your tools just to have 4 extra volts and to have the privilege of paying the Bluetooth tax. I don't know, I don't see that. But if you don't have the 18 volts and you're not on the 18-volt system and you're coming from something else, then maybe. For those of you who roll with the 2 18-volt, 36-volt, I'm really curious on what you think, because this is really my opinion coming from having the corded saw. Do you think jumping for 4 volts to have 1 battery would be worth that cost, knowing what you paid to get this sucker? I'm really curious to know what you think. Is jumping to the 40-volt worth it for you, and what would make you jump there? If you don't own any of these saws, which one out of the 3 seem most appealing to you? If you have the corded one, is this enough to make you jump cordless? If you've got the 36-volt, is this enough to make you jump to the 40-volt? I'd love to know your thoughts and processing on what would make you purchase one of these, especially if you already have one. Now, if you've been paying attention to these saws, you notice they have these little caps on here. You may be wondering what they are. They are a product that I designed a couple months ago to help maximize your dust collection. And they just snap in there. They're super cheap, and I have caps for all of these saws right now on my Etsy shop and other track saws. And if you want to support me or support the channel and maximize the dust collection in your shop, you can click in the link in the description below and go check it out. Thanks for watching. If you want to learn more about that, click on this video right here.